Hey there, it's Mario here, and in this video you're gonna learn how to break through a weight loss plateau. This is one of the most requested topics that I ever got ever since I started a YouTube channel, and it's definitely one of the biggest issues when it comes to dieting down. So I wanted to go into the research, bring you guys all the possible causes, the solutions that you can apply immediately to get through a weight loss plateau. The first step is to really define what a plateau is when it comes to dieting down. And people are often confused with this, right? They think like, okay, if I set up a caloric deficit, I'm gonna be losing this amount of weight per week. This is exactly what's gonna happen. And we try to over quantify things without giving ourselves enough time. And often you realize the hard way that weight loss is not a linear process. It really isn't. I mean, it's all over the place. Some week you might lose a pound, some week 2 pounds, some week nothing, then all of a sudden you lose a pound again. I mean, it's absolutely random, right? So we cannot predict this randomness. All we can do is really give ourselves enough time to collect as much data to see if our program is really working, if our setup of the diet is really working. And that's a weight loss plateau definition has to basically include that randomness. So I would define a weight loss plateau as if you've been staying the same body weight for about 4 to 6 weeks. 4 to 6 weeks is enough time to really go through all of those fluctuations, and if the body weight hasn't moved, then you are in a plateau. That is the definition. So 4 to 6 weeks. Don't forget this. I mean, it's not a week, it's not 2 weeks, it's 4 to 6 weeks. So what are the possible causes? Well, the good thing is there's only 3 options. There's only 3 possibilities when it comes to weight loss plateaus. The number one is not adhering to the diet itself. So this is obvious. This is basically you're not following the diet properly. Number 2 is that you've now reached a new caloric maintenance. So you're no longer in a deficit. Now this amount of food that you're intaking, this amount of activity that you're doing is your maintenance. And number 3, which is the most random one, and that is the water retention effect. So we're gonna dive into all 3, really break them down. So number 1 type of a weight loss plateau, as I said, not complying to the diet. So this can be conscious or unconscious. So a person consciously knows that they're not following the diet plan. They know that the diet plan doesn't fit them. They know that they can't adhere to the caloric deficit. They know that they can't get enough protein. They can't do the exercise plan. I mean, the solution here is pretty obvious. If you're consciously aware of that the setup that you're currently doing isn't working, you have to make changes to become more consistent with the diet. If you're unconscious, and this is one of the most common effects, so obviously people are unconsciously, they're not aware that they're not adhering to the diet. And this is, I mean, well documented in the research. There's one particular study that is very interesting. They took about 200 participants who were obese, and they put them on a diet and they asked them to self-report the intake. So just ask them, hey, well, just tell us how much food you're eating, what is your estimate? And they were actually overestimating the amount of activity they were doing by about 51% and underestimating the amount of calories they were eating by about 47%. So it's quite a big difference, right? So the amount of calories that they were eating was a lot more than they actually thought they were eating. I mean, as human beings, we're horrible at actually estimating the caloric intake. With all the foods that are highly palatable, they are loaded with calories, they don't look big, a Snickers doesn't look big even though it has a lot of calories, and we just fail as a whole species when it comes to estimating this. So if you're unconsciously, just simply unaware that your diet is not working and you're currently in a weight loss plateau, if you don't have objective data what's happening with your diet, I would highly recommend you to go into tools like MyFitnessPal and really trying to break down every little bit of your diet, every little thing that comes into the body, like every piece of food, salad dressing, drink, like really try to be diligent with this for a couple of weeks, and you'll see and you'll notice patterns where you've been overeating but you're not even aware of it. So this is, I mean, obvious. You're definitely just unconscious that you're not following the caloric deficit. So that is the type 1 of a weight loss plateau. Type 2 weight loss plateau is something that is completely normal, and that is reaching a new caloric maintenance. And this is expected. Every diet will eventually have you reach a new caloric maintenance if your goal is to lose a lot of fat. So what happens here? Well, you had a caloric deficit, which is based on your current body weight, your levels of activity, your food intake. But after you've dieted for a while, now your body has adapted to that caloric intake, and it's no longer a deficit. Now it became a maintenance. And also not just the food intake, but also the amount of exercise that you were doing. And this is absolutely normal. I was freaking out when this first happened to me. I was like, shit, I'm following the diet, I'm tracking everything, I'm doing everything, but my weight is not coming off. Like the weight is not changing. So what the hell is going on? Well, my body has simply adopted, and there's three possible scenarios, three possible solutions here. You can increase the caloric deficit, so cut down the calories further, then you can increase your levels of activity, and number three, you can do a combination of both. What is the right option here? Well, that depends on your individual setup. I mean, what is realistically possible for you? I mean, can you decrease your calories further? Is that gonna make your diet miserable? I mean, if you're going from 1,800 calories to 1,600 calories, that guy, that's a pretty hard cut. Or let's say if you're 1,800 calories, you're not doing any cardio, any activity, if you're sedentary, if you're walking less than 1,500 steps a day, I mean, the logical solution would be to increase the amount of walking you do, become more active of a person, add a little bit more cardio, maybe a session or two per week, and then that will allow you to create that caloric deficit in a combination with the lowered caloric intake that is already present in your diet, and you will break through the plateau. And this is very, very common. I think people definitely freak out when this happens. I think you want to reframe this a little bit. The way I reframe it is basically a chance for you to get accustomed to the new weight. This typically happens after you had some success with the diet as well. So you might have lost about 20 pounds, and now all of a sudden the weight just doesn't fucking move for 4 to 6 weeks. And that is completely normal because now that's your new maintenance. You want to get accustomed to it, you want to get used to it. Think of this like a little break from dieting. You might have even tried to increase your calories a little bit, and then you will notice some effects, like all of a sudden you can maintain your weight on a bit of a higher caloric intake because your non-exercise activity thermogenesis recovers. Basically, this is your fidgeting, maintaining your posture. Your body is very, very adaptive and very protective the more you spend time dieting, the more time you spend in that caloric deficit. So you definitely want to make sure that you manage your fatigue levels, that you manage and realistically set up a plan where you can see, okay, this is the amount of activity I can do, this is the amount of calories I can cut, and then see what the best solution for you. That's the type 2 weight loss plateau. This is absolutely normal. This will happen to every single person. If you're dieting to lose a lot of body weight, that is definitely going to happen to you. And the type 3 plateau, the final plateau, the most random one, the one that is driving most people crazy, and that is the water retention effect. And this is obviously normal, right? If you're dieting down, you're in a caloric deficit, you're doing a lot of exercise, I mean, this by itself creates a lot of stress. And then there's also these other factors in your life. And cortisol levels are greatly correlated with the amount of water retention. So the more stressed you are by the diet, and you will be stressed at just a normal physiological response, you will have to retain some water. This effect can be quite intense. I mean, especially in women, I mean, they can retain up to 10 pounds of water weight just randomly, especially through the hormonal changes in their body that's happening every month. Also for guys, I mean, it's not uncommon to not lose any weight for 3 weeks, and then week 4 you drop like 4 pounds in a week overnight, all of a sudden, and it's definitely a normal occurrence in any sort of caloric deficit. And the problem here is that a lot of people freak the fuck out. They freak out here, and they're like, okay, I haven't lost any weight for 3 weeks. Better increase my cardio, better cut down my calories. And this is where most mistakes happen. Guys go too aggressive, too hard, too soon. And what this results in really is increase in stress, because we know that basically more exercise correlates with more fatigue, more stress, and also less food correlates with more stress. So you're amping up cortisol, and it's not uncommon to see guys gaining weight even despite the fact that they've added a ton more exercise, they've ate a lot less food, they still gain weight. So they're like, what the hell is going on? And that often leads to binges and all sorts of different problems. While in reality, you've been making progress, but the water weight has been masking that progress. And that's important to understand, is that the water weight can mask your progress up to 4 to 6 weeks, which is a crazy amount. And what can you do about this? And there's multiple different solutions I'm going to dive into. This is a really complicated issue, so let's dive into the possible solutions. I'm going to give you 4 or 5 solutions that you can use and apply immediately. So the solution number 1 is the best solution, the most obvious one, and that is simple patience, right? This is something, I mean, if you know that your plan is working, and if that's something you first need to do, is trust your plan, trust the process. Basically, you've been making progress, you've been losing fat, but the water weight has been masking that. So you want to give yourself enough time. And most of these effects with water retention would solve themselves automatically through just being patient for about 3-4 weeks, right? So patience is the first thing. Don't diagnose yourself that your diet is not working if you haven't given yourself enough time, as I said, 4 to 6 weeks before you can say, well, shit, now it's time to actually cut the calories or increase the cardio, that type 2 weight loss plateau as we mentioned before, right? So first, before you diagnose yourself with that, have enough patience to really see if it's the water weight. That is the obvious solution, the best solution so far, and one that will save you most headaches out there. So the number 2 solution is something called the dry carb refeed. So this is well documented actually in the Minnesota starvation experiment, which is an experiment done in World War II where they took a bunch of men and they basically wanted to starve them. They put them in a kind of a starvation diet, which is not really a starvation, I would say. They put them on about 1,500 calories, 1,800 calories, and they did some mild activity. And there was actually a couple of books written on this as well. I'm going to leave them in the description below. It's an amazing experiment. You're going to learn a lot from reading this. I mean, guys were basically starving for 6 months, and they put them on this diet. And what they've documented really is that, I mean, they wanted to figure out first how to feed the war prisoners in their camps, which is very, very fascinating, how often to refeed them in these conditions because a lot of people were suffering from illnesses and death and all these other things. So basically what they found out through that timeline of 6 months is that people in the beginning were losing weight quite linearly. Like, so they would drop like 2 pounds per week, and every single week they would drop a little bit of weight. But the further they got into the diet, the further they got into the experiment, the more randomness it occurred in terms of water weight. And this happened across almost every single person in the study. So basically some people weren't losing any weight for 2-3 weeks. All of a sudden overnight, bam, you know, they would drop like 5 pounds. And this is quite evident as well when they did at the mark 3 of the experiment. So the experiment was 6 months. At halfway there, they said, well, let's give them a reward. You know, let's reward our prisoners, quote unquote, our subjects in the study, with a high carb refeed. So they gave them some potatoes, they gave them like turkey meat, I believe, and they gave them roughly about 2,200 calories. And what happened that night after people like basically feasted, this was like a little bit of a binge, they feasted and they were all waking up in the middle of the night. They were peeing, they were getting that whoosh effect, they were stimulating that, basically dropping that water weight. They were peeing out the water weight. And often, I mean, in the next couple of days, the people were noticing they were just dropping weight further and further. And coming close to the end of the experiment, once they started refeeding them again after the experiment, they noticed that they've been losing weight even more due to that whoosh effect. So, I mean, there's no such thing as starvation mode. This is a really good example that really starvation mode doesn't exist. Your body is very adaptive, but it still can't adapt to a really good caloric deficit. I mean, there's no way it's going to adapt completely to completely eliminate the caloric deficit. That doesn't exist. So essentially, there's only the possibility of the water weight, and that's why a lot of people say, well, this whole calorie thing doesn't fucking work. I'm eating 1,500 calories, and I've been doing it for 2 weeks, no weight change. Well, typically, it's just the water weight that is really masking the change. You've been losing fat all along. And one fascinating effect here that is really evident when it comes to that water weight effect is that fat cells, when you quote-unquote burn them, they actually get temporarily replaced by water. And this is something that is very theoretical. There's not much actual proof for that. There's just a theory, some speculation among the experts. And that is often called as the squishy fat, like the soft fat that happens when you're in that point of about 15% body fat. Your fat just feels a little bit softer. And this is noticeable in guys who are between that 12 and 15% body fat range. Not so much with guys who are higher because you have so much body fat you can't really notice this. But that squishy fat is often a really good sign that that will basically stimulate that the flush is coming, right? The flush will come because that fat cell mass just simply got replaced by water temporarily. So basically the flush is coming, like the whoosh effect is coming. And that's how you can see and trust the process and know that it will occur. So one interesting thing is that they've noticed actually that you will gain a little bit of weight. This is the second finding there, is that if you have those weight scales that actually show you body fat, and they usually measure the water through the body and all these other things, you'll actually notice that your weight bumps up a little bit before the next whoosh effect. Like that's quite of an interesting effect as well if you have one of those scales at home. So you kind of keep an eye on that when you're losing weight. So that is kind of the second solution that I wanted to bring here. And the third solution is also related to stress, and that is simply getting enough sleep. So we know that sleep plays a huge role when it comes to fat loss. I mean, not enough sleep. If you sleep 5-6 hours a night, you basically will be losing the same amount of body weight, but some of that body weight will come more from muscle than from fat if you compare to the group that, in the studies at least, that slept about 8-9 hours. So really, really big deal there with the lean body mass retention, which is obviously the goal of every diet, is to burn the fat. keep the muscle, and that's why you want to get enough sleep. And also sleep obviously reduces the stress levels, helps you cope with stress more, and will allow you to get that more of that whoosh effect and to also get rid of the water. The other thing that in general that you can do is take a diet break. So a diet break is a period where you just simply relax a little bit, go to maintenance calories, and this is often planned into the diet. I recommend planning this into the diet if you're dieting for, let's say, blocks of 7-8 weeks where it's like a push to really lose a lot of weight. Then I recommend doing a break for a week where you would stay on a maintenance calories, and then in that time you will actually stay the same weight. So your goal is to maintain the weight, and then to get used to the new weight and also to recover physiologically and psychologically. There's a lot of benefits to diet breaks. They actually do recover and help with hormones such as leptin and also other hormones in your body. I would highly recommend you to incorporate diet breaks in your body, in your diet, and you want to make sure that it's kind of like change the oil before the carb breaks. Really good thing. So diet breaks would be solution number 4. The solution number 5 is just to simply relax. And this is something that is very obvious when people go on a holiday. They just relax a little bit, they chill out, they notice effects that all of a sudden they're starting to lose more weight. And this is because their cortisol levels have simply dropped down because they've stopped with the excessive cardio, they stopped with the excessive exercise, they stopped with the caloric deficit, and all of a sudden, the weight started dropping down. That is a very common effect when guys go on a holiday. They notice this happening. It happened to me all the time. And you want to make sure to relax here from time to time. You want to do things like meditation, you want to do breathing exercise, you want to invest in stress management, and this will greatly help with the water retention effect. I mean, this is a huge benefit when it comes there to that water retention effect, because all of a sudden you can see all those good results that you basically got but you couldn't see. And especially if you're a leaner guy, you will definitely notice when you drop a lot of that water weight, you feel more drier, you feel more fuller, you feel and look a lot better. So that is basically my manifesto when it comes to losing water weight. There's also other things that some people like to incorporate into their diet, such as increasing a lot of water intake per day. So they would say, hey, if you do a lot of water for, let's say if you're doing like a gallon a day, and then all of a sudden you do for 3 days in a row, you do a lot higher than that, then you stop doing that water intake, that heightened water intake, you go back to a normal intake, that all of a sudden your body will get rid of water. I never really had that work for me, but I mean, it's worth a shot. So if you want to try that out, I mean, manipulating your water intake. Also, some people claim that they manipulate their sodium potassium balance. I don't think that's a good idea as a natural. From all the experts and all the research that I've really seen out there, is that your body is pretty well at like managing those. And if you if you can create a temporary effect, it might not be the effect that you want. So definitely, this is all the solutions that I know that really are proven to work. So I hope you enjoy this video. Basically, my little manifesto here on how to break through a weight loss plateau. And this is all you need to know in terms of causes and solutions. Aside from that, I'd love to hear from you in the comments if you found this helpful. If you had your own experience with weight loss plateaus, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure there's a lot of guys watching this video that have been through a weight loss plateau, so don't be afraid to comment, share your story, let me know what's up there. And then aside from that, make sure to hit that subscribe button right in the face to support the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.